Well, folks, I don't know about you, but we have had a lot of fun. Welcome to episode 57, take two, take three, take four. This has been one debacle after another, but we welcome you, Property Avenue WA. We're trying to do it a little bit different. We have still had difficulties with lots of things, but this is news, views, thoughts, and opinions, discovering matters property in WA. And welcome to our property podcast, live stream, and whatever else we're trying to do here in WA, but we generally try to get it right, but it's something we're going to have to resolve. But what Property Avenue WA is about, this is your avenue to matters property in West Australia, and we chat and we do stats and we discover answers to your property questions, and we provide our tips and we have some thoughts and we give our opinions about a whole variety of things here in Western Australia, and the focus is very much WA. And tonight we will obviously do OD stats, if we survive that long. The chat about the duty reform. There's a fair bit going on with ACT, New South Wales and Victoria, but very little commentary here in WA. So it's an interesting little take that we might just have a look at. The $1 million suburbs, there's been a bit of, there was a bit of a reference about the values in property here in Perth, and there's been suburbs that now they're referring to the $1 million suburbs. Is that sensationalism, or is that perhaps something we need to look at? Because I have been asked the question about values here in WA. Discover the answers to your property questions. We've got some great questions that we've been sent through to us, and we'll try to discover the answers to those tonight. And the paper today, there is a reference which I think is a really good one for you, Oscar. Rent is cheaper than it was 10 years ago, which I thought was a really interesting stat. And perhaps you could give us a take. Cyclone Seroja, I think we really need to keep that in our conversation each week, because I've certainly spoken to a lot of people, and again today, who are just doing it really hard, and people need to understand, particularly those in the metro area and outside. And of course, not only that, look at the devastation that just happened down in Albany and Denmark. So we'll have a quick take on that. Golf and the Vines development. You know, golf is very, very important in my heart, but I just thought that was a little take that we might have a quick squeeze at. And a plan to fixing the housing crisis. There was something there about prefabricated homes. So we'll see what that is. We'll have a quick look at the property headlines if we've got time. And the if question. Been a lot about space lately. I've got a good if question to ask you, OD. OD, welcome. Property Avenue WA, episode 57, take 6. How you going?
Mr. Tony Viner, always great to be here, mate. And yeah, finally we've made it live. And I have to say, we won't go into all the ins and outs of all the IT dramas that we've had over the last week, really, but maybe even over the last 48 hours. What I would say, though, I'll just excuse myself up front. If during the course of the next 45 minutes, I just burst out laughing for no reason whatsoever, or for no apparent reason, it is because I'm having flashbacks of the absolute debacle that our IT has given us over the last couple of days. As you know, mate, I've laughed harder off air than I ever have all year, I reckon. Yeah, it's very likely that I will be laughing a lot over the next 45 minutes as well. So other than that, I will try and maintain a level of decorum and seriousness so we can actually talk about some really, really important matters that are currently affecting the WA property market. So I'll let you take the lead with the order of our topics, but I look forward to, I really look forward to the next 45 minutes.
Mate, I will quickly, as you know, for those that if you don't get this on live stream, this is now available on podcast. So your various platforms that you listen to your podcast on, Property Avenue WA is available, and is available every Wednesday. And the real focus that we've been trying to sort out, folks, is the fact that the audio was really, we struggled with, and it was important, particularly when you're doing podcasts. So that is available on Wednesdays, and we will ensure by the time we get around to next week, we get this right. But, mate, there's been lots of chatter and lots of things happening with regard to property. But I will quickly mention our disclaimer, the general advice disclaimer. The information on this podcast is to be regarded as general advice, and your personal objectives, needs, and financial circumstances were not taken into account when preparing this content. Nice, I got that right. We always advise and recommend you seek personal, professional, and financial advice tailored to your specific individual needs before making financial property investment decisions. And as we emphasise time and time again, and again over the last week or two, I've had people that are specifically asking me questions that are associated with them and their circumstances, and the responses to those are different to people asking me questions about their circumstances for obvious reasons. So please, what we're trying to do is help you in a general basis, but if you've got some questions, by all means, although we're having some difficulties, we've still got access to be able to answer your questions. And as I said, we've got a little segment because we do have a range of questions that have been sent through over the last week or two, and we will get onto those today. Mate, OD, stats, what's your thoughts? What's been happening over the last week or two? How are things progressing?
TV, things are progressing. We've still got a very, very strong market here in WA, and that's very consistent with pretty much month in, month out for the last 12 months, both in the sales market, but then also in the rental market. I would say that my discussion with agents over the last 6 weeks or 7 weeks, and even as early as today, that sting and that level of craziness has really come out of the market, both in the rental market and also in the sales market. And the sting I'm referring to is the FOMO, that fear of missing out for both renters and for buyers, where that they're just not feeling that the supply out there is, if they miss out on a property, they just don't see that the next one is around the corner. It's good that that sting has come out of the market, and it's probably for a couple of reasons. One is winter. Our real estate market generally quietens down a little bit as we go into June and July. But then that's also in preparation for what we refer to as the spring selling season, which kicks off in about 2.5 months as well. So that's one thing. The other couple of things, I guess, is that people have been trying to pick the best time of the market to sell, and that really is the top of the market. So when buyers are looking to pick, the bottom of the market, that's the best time that any buyers would be looking to buy, because that's when the market is going to start to upswing and properties go up in value. When you're looking at a seller, the seller wants to pick the top of the market before things start tapering off and the cycle then starts declining. So I think there have been sellers that have been sitting around not wanting to sell in December or January or February because they do think that there's a bit more steam left in the market. And what I think is probably happening right now, we have seen a slight increase in the availability of stock, not so much in the rental market, a little bit more in the sales market. And when we see an increase in supply, then that FOMO that I referred to earlier, where the buyers are sitting there wondering, if they don't get property A, when are they going to be able to buy property B? So that FOMO, when they can see that there is property B and also property C, because there's a bit, they can see an increase in supply, then they stop making those crazy decisions and those crazy offers. So overall, that's actually a really, really good thing for our market. There's the last couple of months, I'd say, is that we've slowed down a little bit. It's still very, very busy, though. Please don't get me wrong. We've still got a very, very busy rental market and sales market. But that absolute hysteria and craziness that we had in the first quarter of this year, we've certainly taken a couple of notches off that level of pace, which is really a good thing.
It's interesting you make comment about the sting, because I had a conversation with a client today who was talking generally about bits and pieces and sort of made some asked some questions about my thoughts on a few bits of things associated with the property market, and I made similar comment. I said, look, at our observation, and perhaps the winter has a little bit to do with it, but also our observation is that perhaps there's a little bit more market and there's not that. And even I've even had clients who are planning to buy but don't seem to be as under that duress that they perhaps were a month or two ago, a few weeks ago. So it's an interesting observation, and we'll just see where that goes. That could change once the winter months. It was 2.1 or something here this morning. You're here in Perth. It was just not a lot of enthusiasm to get outside and do a lot when it's that cold.
No, mate.
But it's interesting times.
Just very, very quickly going back to the stats, I would have thought though, and I mean, even though I'm saying things have quietened off a little bit, still in the last 7 days, we've seen almost 900 sales through Perth. It's 882 sales in the last 7 days through till Friday last week. And this time 12 months ago, it was just over 900 sales as well. So, we're still showing a very consistent level of activity. Back earlier in the year, and I'm talking about January, February, consistently we were over 1,000 sales. And I think our busiest week of sales showed us that we were actually at 1,200 sales through the Perth metropolitan area. So we are down a little bit from that figure. And similarly, listings. Right now, we sit at just over 9,000 listings through the Perth metropolitan area. This time last year, we were just under 11,000 listings. And when we got to our absolute lowest level of stock, which would have been in January and February this year, we were at about 7,300 listings. So, and that was super, super tight. So it's still low stock on the market. It's just not as low as what it was. From the discussion that I have with the real estate agents, though, it seems to be, and they're the ones dealing with the sellers, and they are the ones dealing with the buyers as well. They seem to be reporting to me a little bit of a lower level of activity than what the stats are suggesting. So the stats are still suggesting pretty strong activity and just by sheer volume of transactions. But the feeling that I'm getting from the real estate agents that are doing the deals day to day, I would have expected that I'd see a bit more of a shift in the stats to more so reflect the opinions of the real estate agents. So the stats, and the stats don't lie. Maybe it's more so just that the agents are feeling that things are noticeably different from where they were at the very beginning of the year. Overall, as I see TV, it's still busy, and any slight slowdown that our market is currently happening is actually a really healthy thing for our market.
Hey, the article the other day with the $1 million suburb, did you see that?
Yeah, I did. Yep.
What's your thoughts?
Mate, I actually don't think it's sensationalisation. I think it's absolutely bang on, and I think it's a natural progression that those suburbs that they're basically saying now have got a median price that is a 7-figure sum, that they move into the the $1 million area. I would have thought that naturally we've got to get there eventually, and over our next cycle or even over our next 12 months, there'll be some new suburbs. If our market continues going in the direction that it is, there'll be some new suburbs again that enter that median 7-figure sum, so that $1 million areas of property value. So I'm not surprised by it, and I don't think it's sensationalisation either. I think it's reporting of the facts, and overall, we know long term, and I'm talking really long term, values of properties rise. So it's not overly surprising, and particularly on the back of the 12 months that we've just had, to see a number of new suburbs enter the $1 million median price bracket. I would have expected that.
With that, I had a client from a new person, shall I say, rather than a client, but someone who's inquiring and wanting some assistance. We had a chat, and they're from Sydney, and their observations were it's getting to the point, if it hasn't already, that Sydney's now just become unrealistic and unaffordable, and so when we look at, I suppose where I'm coming from is when we look at having the $1 million suburbs, we're still a long way away. We're a long way ahead of what they're talking in Sydney and over the East Coast with regard to values and property. And certainly these people they have been contemplating, and I'm sure there's plenty others the same. And I'm trying to find an article that I saw also in the last week or so, but their observation was, hey, do we entertain the idea of selling up here, buying something that we can well and truly afford in WA, and have a little bit more of an easier lifestyle and still have some money in the bank? And they are seriously entertaining that idea because they're not in a position to sell their existing property and buy something else, because even if they did come out, they would come out in front, But their argument is, would we be able to get another home? And if we did, what sort of price we're going to pay in comparison? So when you consider what we're talking about here with a few suburbs that have gone up to the $1 million bracket, we're still a long way away ahead from what's going on the other side of the country.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I would have thought that when we're talking comparative language, we're talking about our suburbs that enter the $1 million bracket. And I don't know the Sydney market very well, TB. I would have thought that they're talking about the Sydney suburbs that are entering the $2 million market. Like, you know,
Yeah.
they've got some
Yep.
new contenders, and you know, it's a great position to be in for those people in New South Wales that decide or need to move over to WA, because the bang for their buck that they get over here in WA, not just Perth but anywhere in regional WA, is very, very good value for money compared to what they're used to. On the flip side, I feel really, really sorry for the WA people that have to go over there, because not only, you know, you'll sell up what you've got here and whatever standard of living you're used to, you're pretty unless there's something really attractive in your employment package, or you've come into money somewhere along the line. If you sell up over here and you go and put that same money into property over there, you're not going to get the same standard of living. It's as simple as that. And that's whether or not you're buying over there, or you know, the rental market as well is going to be commensurate with the property value. So you're not going to get anywhere near the same quantum of property for that same level of money. So, and you know, Sydney is it just appears to be a beast of its own, and I don't know where the buck stops over there. It's got to be related to affordability, and you know, people's ability to service mortgages and to service their borrowings. Obviously, the very low interest rates really help keeping a lid on the cost of borrowing. But that's only one factor. And at some point in time, as we're seeing, and we predicted a lot over the last 6 months, we really are seeing now that those interest rates are going to rise a lot earlier than 2024, which is what the Reserve Bank has been saying. So it's a tough one, that Sydney market.
And it's also interesting as to, you talk about someone moving, going not Sydney to here, but WA to New South Wales. I've actually had a client who experienced that, sold a 4x2 in Bayswater, had to sell a property in Queensland, and still had to borrow money to buy a property in Sydney where they're going back for their work, and the place was not even close to the 4x2 here in Perth. Lovely home, a 3x1 or whatever it was in Sydney, and we're talking over $2 million or something silly. So that's, you know, massive, massive, massive difference. And what you're buying for $1 million here, you're probably going to spend another $4 million over there, which sadly is possibly the case. But yeah, it's a big difference. But we're focused on WA. Hey, listen, the other topic that I've found of interest, that there's been a lot of chat, and there's been some commentary here, and I know some have talked about downsizing and making it affordable for people. And there was an article a week or two ago, and I really would like to get a financial planner or someone similar on board to discuss about retirement and people, you know, where they wanting to downsize. But the question being is, and there was one article suggesting that, you know, perhaps people in the TV bracket age group, the baby boomer group, that we should be selling our homes and getting something smaller and creating more homes for people that are seeking homes, which I'm not quite sure about. But the argument to that then was another article that I read where the point was, well, there are some people that are sitting on their patch. One, because that's their home and that's where they love being. But the other part being is, well, I get out, I've got to spend more money to buy. I've got fees to get out. I've got stamp duty to get back in, and I'm not left with very much, if anything at all. And over in New South Wales, they're talking about the option of land tax or stamp duty. And did I read, where was it? There was something like, there was an article I picked up on, and it was the property boom has added an extra $1 billion in stamp duty. Billion. So their
Wow.
stamp duty has earned New South Wales for the 2021 financial year $9.379 billion dollars. Billion
Wow.
dollars.
Yeah.
So why would state governments entertain reforming stamp duty unless there was going to be a better alternative?
Yeah. No, they wouldn't. They absolutely wouldn't. Certainly not our state government. And any of the state governments over there, if they're talking about it, they'll probably try and do the right thing and talk about it, and then it's going to take a long time for anything to get passed and then implemented anyway. But in that time, there'll be another 1 to 2 years that goes by where they earn another $9 billion from like, it's a very, very good, easy form of revenue source for each state government. And let's face it, there's a lot of money to pay back because of the cost of what COVID has been to all of our states' economies. So it's a bit of a hard one, such an easy revenue stream for them to turn the tap off or to tighten the tap on. But so far
I'd
as
still like to see. Sorry, go on. Keep going. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, getting a financial planner on here, and start talking about retirement. I think there's two angles. One is you probably need to sit down and have a financial or a retirement planner in your lounge room TV, because you're knocking on heaven's door, mate. It's more than time for you to actually sit down and have a chat to that sort of a person. But then professionally, it would be good to have someone to come and discuss some of the issues that are facing. And you touched on them basically. But to have some real life clients that are facing the sorts of issues that you mentioned. And I know for a fact there are some people, which you touched on, there are some people that the cost of them to downsize, it makes it unaffordable. Like, it's not a good or a smart financial decision, but in some instances it's actually unaffordable for them to do it. So their hands are tied. They need to stay put.
Yeah. Yep.
You there, mate?
Yeah. It's an awkward one, and yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Well, you must have just gone and had a little bit of a grandpa sleep.
Oh, please. No, but I'm still, although we do things for the first home buyer, can you not hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Can you hear me? Oh,
yeah, I can hear you.
Although we do things for the first home buyer, I still think there is room to move with the concept of doing something for the over 60s or the over 65s when it comes to downsizing and stamp duty. I still think there's an avenue there that should be entertained, but we may have that as a discussion down the track. Anyway, there you go. I've got some really good questions that have been sent through, and I thought we'd get onto those because with time-wise, we suddenly get caught up and get chatting, and then we lose the opportunity to ask these questions. And these people have made the effort. The question we got, so this is our segment that we refer to as discovering the answers to your property questions. And one of the questions I've had in the last week or so, hi guys, I've looked at a few homes lately for sale. We have since found one that we like, and we've done an inspection. At an inspection, we advised we would like to proceed with buying. However, the agent told us we had to complete an intention to make an offer, which also required us to sign. Why do we need to do this and not prepare an offer?
Yeah, you know what? We touched on this, or you and I touched on this off here probably about a week ago, TV. And since that time, including today, I've actually asked around and done a bit of research. And my answer last week was going to be, yeah, that's news to me, TV. I haven't really heard of that sort of activity where an agent is suggesting that a buyer needs to submit an informal but in writing interest as to what their offer would look like if they did proceed with an offer. And I hadn't really heard much about it, but over the last week when I've been asking the questions, it actually seems to be that it's I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it's a regular practice, but it certainly is out there. And I think it's largely due to, well, one is the real estate agents want to make sure that they're dealing with someone that's just not all talk. And so typically when people are prepared to commit to something on paper, and that's not making the offer, but it's more, as you put it, the intention to make an offer, but it's in writing anyway. And typically if people are prepared to do something like that in writing, it does support a bit of credibility as to, you know, where their proposal, where their offer might go. The other thing being as well, I think technology has facilitated this a lot as well. And whether it's electronic signing, whether it's PDF, whether it's email, whether it's different apps that are available, previously, when we didn't have all this sort of technology available, it would be much harder to actually get someone to put anything in writing that a agent could go and have a chat to the seller and say, look, this person is rigid itch, that this is the sort of terms, the price, the conditions, the finance, all that sort of stuff, that if they put in an offer, this is what they're thinking. Should we go back and actually get them to formalize an offer? Today, it's very easy to do that because of the technology available to the real estate agents and therefore to the buyers. But, you know, going back a few years, that level of technology wasn't around. And the whole idea of actually submitting some sort of intention to buy a property would have been a far harder task than what it is today. So I think the times have changed a little bit, but it was an education for me to realise that this whole submission, or rather an intention to make an offer prior to actually making the offer itself, is actually it's more of a common practice than what I thought.
Yeah, and I made the comment, my observation, I must admit I hadn't seen it before, but when I then had a look at content, as I explained to the person who asked that question, I said, look, this is probably more what I would suggest is qualifying the buyer. They're identifying where you're at because there's lots of buyers about, and obviously to assist the sellers and to make their assessment, saying, well, I've got these three buyers, they got good details, they're qualifying them, and away you go. So it's rather than doing a contract, doing an offer, and if you like, wasting everybody's time with all due respect. So that's that's that question. So I hope that answers that. Hi guys, can you please advise what the process of lodging an offer is? We have it's really interesting the number of questions I've actually asked that have been sent to me that have been about buying. So it's quite intriguing this week, or over the last 2 weeks. What the process of lodging an offer is. We have completed an offer a few days ago and have had pre-approval for finance. We're not too far off the actual asking price. It is now some 4 days, and we've heard nothing. Is there a time frame to respond to an offer, and what should we do?
So the answer there is no. There is no time frame, or technically legally there is no time frame to respond to an offer unless a time frame is stipulated on the offer. So that's the first bit. The second bit is, if there is no time frame stipulated on the offer, either party can withdraw. So a buyer can withdraw their offer from being an offer prior to the time that it gets accepted, if they feel that it is taking too long to get a response. There is another component to it as well, which I don't know if there's a bit more to this. Excuse me, if there's a bit more to the story, TV, but to not hear anything after 4 days of making a genuine offer to buy a property, finance is getting organised, and the buyer's not wasting any time, but to not get any response at all is there's a missing piece of the puzzle there, and I would hope that it's a bit more than just laziness on behalf of the agent.
Well, I have since followed that up myself with that person, and they've since been because I suggested they contact the agent to find out what is going on and give you an update. And I am pleased to say that they've actually come back, albeit not I would have thought they would have, but they have come back and they have been successful with their offer. So
Right.
it ended up being a good story. But yeah, I must admit I was a bit like you. I was a bit surprised they had no communication. But I did get hold of that person and asked them how they were going and if I could help them at all. And they made their own phone call. And
Good.
eventually the agent came back to them. And I'm pleased to say, I'm actually aware that they have been successful. The other one is Hi Oscar and TV. Listen to you guys quite a bit. We have not had a lot of success buying so far for our first home. We are from Sydney, and it has been explained the process is very different here in WA. Can you explain what the buying process is here in comparison? Because in Sydney, we have a cooling off period. I've already explained to these people because they eventually rang me, in fact, with regard to this. And as I explained, some of their issues was associated with the conditions they were putting on the contract. And because it is different, I've since stepped in to assist them with that process. But for those that are asking, particularly those from other parts of, I have had a number of Eastern States clients not being aware there is no cooling off period. Once you do an offer here in WA, your offer is subject to various conditions, including finance, or it may be subject to the sale of another property, or it may be subject to funds coming from your super fund, or whatever the case may be. And it may be subject to a range of conditions, be it a building inspection, be it a termite report, maybe a subject to electrical and plumbing, and so it goes. But at the end of the day, once that offer is done, other than those conditions, you can't then decide a few days after you've put in your offer and your offer's been accepted, you can't then say, no, I don't want to do that anymore. Whereas a cooling off period over East is exactly that, not quite that simple, but that's basically what it is. Do you want to expand on what I've just saying there?
I don't know if I've got much more to expand on than what you've just said, TV, but for a long time, and as long as I can remember, there has always been that major difference between how we do it over here and I guess how they do it over there. I'm used to the way that we do it here in WA. I think that's the right way to do it. And for my own personal learning, I'd probably like to learn a bit more about the cooling off period over there and how it actually works for them when someone changes their mind once they're committed to a contract. So, but over here, I think a cooling off period would only really complicate a deal. And over here, if you say you're going to do something and someone agrees with the conditions and terms of an offer, well, the deal's done, and then it's just a matter of satisfying the conditions. And those conditions do not include a cooling off period. So other than that, I think you explained it perfectly.
Another question we've got, and just actually, I'll go one step further. I'll go back a step. When you're talking about, we're talking about offers previously, and then you can withdraw your offer if you put an offer in and you haven't heard anything and you've decided, you know. But I actually had someone who was concerned about missing out, and they wanted to know if they could make more than one offer on not just one home, you know. They could go and I went, no, don't ever do that. And of course, for those that particularly first home buyers and those that don't know any different, the drama, why we suggest you don't do that, for a couple of reasons. What are you going to do if you suddenly get two offers that are accepted? You've got a problem. So the answer to that is one offer, attend to one dealing at one time, and if you're not successful, then obviously move on to the next, or if you're subject to finance, etc. But yes, that was an actual question that was asked of me, a direct phone call to me, because they were becoming frustrated missing out. And so they wondered whether it was in their interest to go and put a few offers around so they ensured they got a place. And I had to quickly put a blanket over that and put that little fire out very quickly. So,
but you can see the logic with that, because in the rental market, and certainly the rental market that we've had, and even the rental market that we've got, it's a very common practice that renters will apply and make offers to rent more than one property, and sometimes several more than one property as well, because the consequences of having 2 phone calls at the same time saying, yes, the owner would like to proceed with your application, the consequences are not as disastrous as if you get those same 2 phone calls for properties that you've accidentally just bought at the same time. So from the rental market side of things, if you've got 2 applications, both of them get accepted, you basically say to the property manager, sorry, I don't want to proceed anymore, and you haven't lost any money, and legally you're not doing anything wrong. But it's a completely different ball game when you're buying properties as opposed to renting, obviously.
Yep. Last one for the night, we'll do for now anyway. TV, I recently bought a home, however, I'm unsure about the security. The property was previously a rental property, and I'm unsure if I have all the keys and all the codes. Is it overkill if I have all the locks changed and recode the security systems? My immediate answer, I suppose, the person to get hold of would be Justin Collins from Aviso Insurance with regard to that one. But quite honest, I personally think it's a very good idea to change the locks when you buy a new home, because you don't know how many people have been associated with that property. And I think as a security measure, absolutely in your interest to consider changing, particularly your outside locks and new keys, because as we all know, particularly rental properties, and you probably be able to explain this better than I, but how many keys have been cut? How many other people have got keys, and how many people have been through that property? So your thoughts?
Yeah. I agree 100% with what it is that you've just said. For the amount that you'd invest in having a locksmith come out and just change the barrels in the locks, because you don't need to change the whole lock, you just need to change the barrels, and then supply new keys or key for the new barrels. It's a really, really smart thing to do, especially, let's face it, in the times that, the way things are these days with break-ins and the crime through basically every suburb. So I think it's a really, really smart idea. It's a small price to pay for your own peace of mind. And so far as the rental properties are concerned, you're right, TV. I mean, people, once they've got their hands on those keys for 12 months or 2 years, you have no idea how many other keys for that property are out there in circulation. And I know as property managers, we get the same keys back that we handed to the tenant, so we can always be confident of that. And we take photographs of them and we match them up to make sure that what we handed out, we actually get back. But we don't know if there's copies made, and there's copies out there. And those same keys that we get back from tenant A typically are the keys that we then pass on to tenant B as well. So I think I'm surprised, actually, in property management we don't have a better system for keys, or basically new keys or new locks each time a tenant goes into a property. I'm surprised we don't have a better system. That said, it's just been the industry norm, and we just carry on and do what we've always done. So it's honestly not something that comes up. Now that we're having the conversation, I probably think it should come up a bit more than what it does.
Yep. I thought it was a really good question. Hey, listen, to those people that sent those questions, to both Odu and I, thank you so much. And we really encourage people to do that on a regular basis. And certainly, as we say, our podcast is available. I know once you've listened to the podcast, you can't ask questions because we're not live, of course, but you're always welcome via our Facebook page, our Instagram page, or our live chat when we do our chat on Tuesdays, or you can send an email to Oscar and I through our respective businesses. You're always welcome to ask those questions. The other thing that I was going to get to, which I found really, really interesting, and I thought was a really good topic particularly for you, considering your dedicated property management business, your property management side of things. The paper today, rent cheaper than 10. Yes, mate.
Just looking at your screen, mate. I know you're not at Optus Stadium, but that green screen that you've got behind you, it kind of looks like a bit like the Optus Oval. But you're not sitting there in the commentary box at Optus Stadium, are you?
No, it's just, you know what that's about? It's all about the if question. I'm just creating the mood.
Space.
Just creating the mood. Just creating the mood, yeah.
I'm pretty sure space isn't green.
You don't know. You haven't been there yet.
Nah, but a
You
friend
don't
of mine
know.
has.
Hey, listen, rent cheaper than 10 years ago. I found that a really interesting article in the paper today. What's your thoughts? What's your observations? Because it was also made mention about the fact that people are becoming, or not becoming, but landlords are obviously focusing, and I know we've had this conversation before, that the landlords are probably more interested in maintaining good relationships with their long-term tenants. And if they've got a good tenant, then of course rent's important to them because that's what it's about.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you've got a good tenant, you want to look after that tenant. It works both ways, doesn't it?
That's exactly right, TB. I did read that article that you sent through to me, and if you hadn't have sent it through to me, I would have completely missed it. I have to say that I was pretty surprised when I first read that. I thought, what? How could they say that rents now are cheaper than where they were at 10 years ago? But then they did have some statistics in there to back it up. So I get, and I haven't looked at the statistics to try and work out whether they're accurate or not. So I'll take it on face value. But yeah, initially I'm a bit surprised to hear or see that that's the case. I do look back at that time though, and we had just really, I mean, the GFC, all the dust had settled on the GFC, and then we went back into a bit of a mining boom as well. So if there was actually, and that maybe that's a point. If those stats are, say, WA wide, well, we also know that with the mining boom through our mining towns like Newman and Headland and Karratha, Onslow, all those sorts of mining towns, we saw the rents over there go through the roof, and they didn't just double. They went from $350, $450 a week. They went up to $1,000 a week. Then they went to $1,500, and some of them went to more than $2,000 a week. So, would that have had an impact on the average rent? Of course, it would. And that would have really dragged up the average rent. So it's important to actually have a look at the time period and where those statistics have come from. Maybe that those ridiculous rents that we saw back then, maybe that actually has drags the median rent up so high that now when we look back 10 years ago, we sit there and go, far out, our rents today, even though they've gone up, are not as high as what they were 10 years ago. Maybe factually that's correct, but I think it's pretty important to keep it in context as to, well, why is that the case? So, but the facts are the facts. But yeah, I was definitely surprised to read that was the headline.
Well, with regard to that, so for people wanting to know what we're talking about, there was 200. This is from the Real Estate Institute of WA. It shows that of 238 suburbs, 235 have cheaper mediums now than compared with each suburb's previous peak. And of those, 201 are more than 10% cheaper than their previously highest level, and 37 were more than 20% cheaper than their previous peak. And to give you an example, a Careen, it's currently $460 a week rent, which is 32% cheaper than the $678 a week rent in the third quarter of 2012. That was Careen. And as they said, you've got to consider the fact that the median rent now is $460 a week. That's come off a very low base of $350 in mid-2018. So it's a pretty low base that it's come off from. So you've got to take that into consideration as well. But I thought it was a really interesting article, and hence I sent it through to you this morning because I thought you would, if you hadn't already seen it, you'd find that quite intriguing.
Yeah, and I also agree with that closing point that Damien Collins made as well, and that is much to the contradiction of some of the not very pleasant media stories that we've seen in the last 3 or 4 months about homelessness and landlords evicting tenants and so forth. That very much, I think, is sensationalized and focuses on the minority and absolutely not the majority. I really do believe and know from the landlords that I deal with that people are not interested in maximising the rent for their property. They're interested in maximising the outcome, and the outcome very much includes the quality of the tenant. So very much agree with what Damien said there. If you've got a good quality tenant that looks after the place, pays the rent on time, trying to get that extra $5 or $10 a week and having that level of greed attached to the rent is that's not what most landlords are doing. Absolutely not.
Mate, the other thing that I wanted to make reference to, and I want to keep on this, even if there's only a few hundred people that hear about it, then they can pass the word around. But Cyclone Seroja in the Midwest region, I know, even the bushfires at Wirraloo earlier in the year, and then the cyclone, and then of course to hear that devastation that's occurred down in Albany and Denmark. In the last couple of days, or this week, in fact, the pressure, and don't forget, there's been a building company down that way has recently gone into liquidation. So, already there is massive pressure on the building industry. And the last thing we need is more devastation to property. And I don't know, I haven't had the opportunity to sound that out. I know there's been plenty of damage, but what's happened to the housing market, I'm not sure. But what I do want to do is make reference to the Midwest region. Only today I had a conversation with someone, and they have got a property, a farming property. The assessors have been out to do the assessment. They haven't heard any more. Now, this is nearly 10 weeks or so. They've got an alternative in which to live. The actual premises that have got destroyed are actually for the staff to live.
Wow.
And so it's fortunate the main homestead is not being damaged. But time and time again, I'm hearing commentary and hearing feedback from people and clients. People ring me with regard to that. And I think we really, really need to get the message out there that this is there when entering the winter months. Only the other day, 2 weeks ago, there was a storm that went through a big not so much a storm, but really, really strong winds and ripped all the tarpaulins off the roofs that were used were roofs, so the tarpaulins over them, pulled them to shreds. And the poor old emergency services are out there again. And I read an article on the weekend, I think it was, where Josh Kennedy from the West Coast Eagles, who went up to Northampton, he's a Northampton boy, and just put a smile on people's faces to go up there and say hello and help. But I think we need to be aware that there's more to be done there. And I think, in fact, there was a photo of one of the guys there where Josh was with the two boys. That particular family, I have a bit to do with Chatty Smith. He's a real estate agent up in the Midwest region, and he looks after mainly farming properties. Lovely, lovely guy, but his home was smashed, and they were fortunate. They've got a little cottage. They do Airbnb, and that's where the family's now living, while they understand it's going to be a while before. But I think it's really important that we keep that message up and let people know that there is still help required up there. And they're nowhere near rebuilding at this point in time. And not just there, but places like Perenjori, Mininu, the lady that I was talking to today, she was saying that, there's areas like that. Have you organised to come to Wongan for the golf weekend? Long weekend, not long weekend, 21st of July, I think it is. You'll love it. Food is fantastic. Organised? Hospitality is brilliant. Golf, who cares?
Mate, we briefly
all you need is a woolly jumper, gloves, a beanie, and golf clubs.
Yeah. I'd love to. Can't make any commitment, mate. I'm pretty head down with work at the moment, but I'm really glad that you did bring up the the Cyclone Seroja stuff, because I totally agree with you, mate. There's it goes away pretty quickly in terms of the coverage of it and the awareness of it, but the problem itself, the devastation and the recovery, that doesn't go away, and it certainly doesn't go away quickly for all the towns that you mentioned. Obviously Kalbarri, Three Springs, and there's still a lot of devastation and people doing it tough. Good news story though, I think it was only yesterday that I saw Josh Kennedy again with, I think, our Perth Lord Mayor, that a fund that Josh Kennedy and a couple of the other footballers up there had set up. I think they reached a goal of 20 grand that they were able to raise, which that's a massive amount of money. It's probably not huge in the context of the amount of money that needs to be spent in the recovery effort, but far out, that's it's a lot of money in isolation by itself anyway, and just a really, really great effort. It's really, really sad because you do see in the news COVID just continues to dominate play. The vaccines are just what's dominating play at the moment. But not even 6 months on, we've got Cyclone Saroja. We're now hearing about Albany in Denmark, like you said, just from the last couple of days of weather. But then the Wirraloo bushfires, and end of last year or the very beginning of this year, I think there was that flooding in Carnarvon as well. So I really do feel for the people that are affected by these Mother Nature events. And with or without the news, the show's got to go on for them, and they're living and breathing this every day and trying to attempt to make some sort of recovery. So the more awareness that we can have, I think the better.
Yep, I agree. So we'll keep on reminding people about that, and if we just do our little bit as far as awareness, and we will. I intend to sort of make a few phone calls and make contact with a few areas around, and just see how things are progressing, and maybe we might be able to get a CEO or someone on board, or a Shire president on board, and have a chat just as a little reminder. And not only that, it's nice that this is a WA program just to see what's going on in those regions and those areas. We'll see how we go. Hey, quick, just a change of direction a little bit. Vines Golf Course and the redevelopment. Did you read about that? It's got the Vines WA has a $200 million plan to redevelop its Swan Valley Golf Course, which will involve removing 15 hectares of the green to make way for hundreds of houses.
So golf course no more?
No, golf course will. When I first read that, I went, "Whoa, that's interesting." Because of course, don't forget for the development at Burswood there, they got rid of that golf course, and that's not uncommon overseas, particularly a place like areas like Singapore. They've offloaded a couple of their golf courses. Admittedly, they don't have the land that we have here, but But no, they're actually. What they are advising is there will be about 9 holes that will disappear from that resort is 30 years old. I didn't know that.
The Vines?
30 years. I didn't. Yeah. So that'll make.
Would have had a guess at something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. But so it'll remove 9 holes, and the concept is the creation of space for approximately 325 dwellings. So that's interesting when we talk about housing, and that's going to include seniors precinct, terrace housing, and family style homes. So a good broad spread, and it'll be interesting to see where that development goes and how that. But when I first saw it, I went, whoa! But more than 85% of the existing golf course is going to be retained. So I feel much better as I read the article further.
It sounds like
much more at ease.
It sounds like a win-win for the area. It's a win-win for Ellenbrook, but just that Swan Valley area, just as a bit of a tourist, even local tourism through the Swan Valley, it's an amazing part of WA. It all sounds very positive. I can't wait to see that eventuate over the next few years.
It always intrigues me when you go to play golf there. These kangaroos, that there's people from interstate and even overseas. I'm sure I've had some friends that I've taken there, and they've been staggered that these kangaroos are just lounging around and watching walk by. And it's not just a golf experience; it's also a life, an Australian wildlife experience. It's quite intriguing. So. It's probably something that you wouldn't get too many other places other than where's that golf course? I saw that guy the other day and he was playing, and next to this big alligator came out of the water. Did you see that?
I think I've seen a TikTok video.
Guy playing golf. This massive alligator came out. Yeah, I don't know, but I think I prefer a kangaroo than an alligator, just quietly. The property headlines. I'll quickly make reference to those. There's been a few, and we're looking at. We're just looking at what's going on. But what I did like, we're talking about homelessness. I don't know whether you're aware of the real estate firm, but there's a real estate office that where's my whiteboard? That they are pledging $250 towards the Fremantle Homeless Services, the St Patrick's Community Support Centre. $250 for every home they sell between 400 and 750,000, and then properties from 750,000 in excess of 751,000, they'll be donating $500 towards this Fremantle Homeless Services, St Patrick's Community Support Centre. I love stories like that.
Mate, it's a great story. You should give the real estate agent a plug. Who's the real estate agent?
It's Mikasa Property Boutique. Have you heard of them in North Perth?
Yeah, right. I know of them. I don't know them.
Mikasa Property Boutique.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yep. I thought so too. So that will be so that was I thought that was an interesting little article and a good little point. And the other thing that I think we'll touch on, because of our dramas that we've been having with audio, etc. But there was an article the other day that I really found interesting about the RBA, the Reserve Bank warns banks to maintain lending standards, but there's also been some commentary about interest rates. And and I think we don't have time now, but we'll certainly get onto that in the next episode or two. I'm hoping, if we get this audio sorted, I'm hoping that we can get a guest, but I'm a bit embarrassed to have a guest on if we can't get this little problem that we're having at the moment. But we'll have it resolved, fingers crossed, folks, by next week, I promise you. So we won't go any further with the property headlines, but the if question.
Space.
The if question. Yep, the if question. It's not hard to imagine what the if question is, but there's been a fair bit of chatter about someone was paying, was it 30 million or 300 million or 30 billion to go into space? Wow. So I thought, why not ask the question, if you were given the opportunity to go into space, would you go? And is there a particular planet you would prefer to go to?
No, my answer is no. I wouldn't go.
You would? No, well, that's good because nor would
I honestly don't care. You know what, the first thing that comes to mind in terms of I have no aspirations to go to space. That's one thing. But the other thing being is that, mate, I've got a young family. I've got a beautiful wife, and if I went to space and something, knowing my luck, something goes wrong, or we run out of fuel, or the thing blows up or whatever, and then I'm sitting there going, oh yeah, because I wanted to go to space, but I don't get to see my family again. That'd be pretty devastating. So yeah, no, I just wouldn't go. Would you go?
Oh,
would you go to space?
No, mate, I'm scared of heights.
That's hilarious.
No, you know what I'm like when it comes to heights. I told you I had another fall the other day. I flipped over and fell in the pool. Yeah. I was doing something the other day, and I revisited I had a flashback. It wasn't funny. I was shaking, and my wife was most concerned. I ended up with a few bruises, but the pool is empty, and I'm serious. Yeah, I did. I wasn't going to tell you, but I couldn't help it. Yeah, that wasn't funny. Yeah. No.
Oh, mate.
And just to add to our humour, while we've been doing our bits and pieces, and you're worrying about my green space behind me, we had to quickly convert from the computers to our phone, folks. So we do apologise for the quality, but we thought, well, there's one way of resolving these. So we've done the show via our mobiles. And while I was doing that in my little green thing that sits behind my chair and normally has a message on the back, we didn't have time to do that. But when I swung around, I had a lovely, nice cold drink on the right here, a nice soda water with some lime in it. That's gone, I don't know where, but there's a pile of files on my right, and I think they're going to be a bit soggy right now. It hasn't been pretty. Has not been pretty. Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure.
But it's worth every minute.
Yeah, I know. Look, for those that are listening, you can get our podcast. I do hope the quality is an improvement, and we'll do everything we can to get that sorted, to make sure it's 100% by our next episode. For any inconvenience, we do apologise. If you do have questions, you're always welcome. We're accessible via Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And of course, you can always contact Oscar or I via our respective businesses if you've got any questions or we can help you at all. And other than that, have fun. Please be safe and think of those other people around you in your neighbourhood and those other areas that are doing it a bit tough. Think about those. And if you can help out, I think that'll be something special. Take care and look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, TV.
Hang on. Oh.
What are you doing, mate? You got an IT problem?
I'm gonna... That worked. It's got the wrong music.